clanging of iron echoed inside the train car, a metallic chorus that marked every twitch, every breath, every hopeless shuffle of the prisoners chained together. Malik sat hunched against the wooden wall, his wrists raw from the iron cuffs, his ankles bruised where shackles bit deep into flesh. The air was suffocating, sweat, fear, and the faint stink of blood mingled with the cold draft that slipped in through cracks in the boards. He had been tricked. That thought pulsed in his mind like a wound that refused to close. The men who had promised work, food, and safety had only delivered betrayal. They dragged him north, far from anything he knew. Now, Siberia stretched ahead like a graveyard without end. Malik's skin, dark as polished earth, drew stares even here, even in this pit of despair. The Russian guards who had chained him mocked him with slurs he could not fully understand but felt in his bones. He was a stranger twice over, foreign by origin and condemned by circumstance. His identity had become a spectacle, a target. Every laugh, every shove from the guards was sharper because of it. The train jolted, and Malik's head slammed against the wall. He winced but stayed silent. Around him, other prisoners groaned. Some were farmers caught in Stalin's purges, others mere suspects branded as enemies of the state. Their faces were pale, hollowed by hunger and terror, but their eyes carried the same emptiness. Malik feared was taking root in his own. As the wheels screeched against the frozen rails, Malik closed his eyes. He thought of home, the wide fields where he had once run as a child. Barefoot under the sun, his mother's voice rising above the wind as she called him back for supper. Her laughter, warm and deep, had been his anchor. Now that sound was only a memory swallowed by chains. A sudden roar snapped him back. The guard nearest the door barked in Russian, slamming his rifle butt against the floor. Malik didn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. Silence. The prisoners quieted instantly. A whip hung from the guard's belt like a promise. Hours passed in the rattle of the train. Malik's wrists ached, but worse was the heaviness in his chest. He knew the truth already. This journey was not temporary. The Gulags were not places one returned from. They were black holes that devoured men whole. When at last the train screeched to a halt, the doors groaned open, and a blast of icy wind knifed inside. Malik shivered violently, the cold sinking into his bones as if it had been waiting just for him. V. Cody. A guard shouted, "Out!" One by one, prisoners stumbled from the car. Malik's feet hit the snow, and it burned like fire. He looked up. Before him stretched a landscape of endless white, broken only by dark pines and the faint outline of wooden barracks. The air was sharp, tasting of iron and frost. The guards wasted no time. Dogs lunged at their chains, barking furiously as the men were shoved into lines. Malik stumbled, nearly falling, but a rifle barrel pressed into his back forced him upright again. He glanced sideways and caught sight of another prisoner, a thin man with sunken cheeks and trembling lips. The man whispered something in Russian, clutching the cross hidden in his sleeve. Malik didn't know the words, but he recognized the fear. The commandant stepped forward. A stout man in a fur hat, his breath puffing white. He surveyed the new arrivals with a sneer, his eyes lingering on Malik longer than the rest. "Here," the commandant said slowly, his broken English laced with scorn, "you are no man. You are slave. You work or you die." The words cut through Malik like the wind itself. Slave, not prisoner. Not even human. The guards herded them toward the camp gates, a wall of barbed wire glistening with frost. Inside, the barracks loomed dark and suffocating. Beyond them, pits of frozen earth yawned open, half filled with timber, rock, the unmarked graves of those who had not survived. As Malik crossed the threshold into the gulag, he felt the weight of invisible chains clamp down. He remembered his mother's voice again, but this time it was fading. Still, deep inside, something flickered. Fear consumed him. Humiliation pressed on him, but beneath it all, a stubborn ember of resistance glowed. He could not name it yet, but it was there, the belief that even in a land of snow and chains, he would endure. The gates clanged shut behind him. Malik had entered a world designed to erase him. But somewhere, buried under pain and frost. His spirit whispered back, "I am still alive." The first night in the Gulag was colder than Malik believed a body could endure. The barracks walls were thin planks that let the Siberian wind whistle through the cracks. Dozens of prisoners huddled together on wooden bunks, wrapped in rags that hardly deserved to be called blankets. Malik lay awake, teeth chattering, listening to the hollow coughs, the groans, and the whispers of men too broken to sleep. The air smelled of sweat, mildew, and despair. At dawn, the guards stormed in. "Podium," one barked, kicking a man who had not risen quickly enough. Malik staggered to his feet, his joints stiff, his body aching from the hard plank beneath him. The prisoners shuffled into line, eyes downcast, as bowls of thin gruel were shoved into their hands. Malik stared at the watery broth, floating with a few grains, barely enough to keep a man standing. His stomach growled in protest, but he forced it down. Survival demanded swallowing whatever scraps they gave. The day's labor began at once. Chains rattled as they were driven out into the open fields where icy wind lashed their faces. Malik's task was chopping wood. An axe, dull and heavy, was shoved into his hands. "Rabbity." The overseer barked. "Work." The first swing jarred Malik's arms, the vibration biting into muscles already weak. His hands blistered quickly, skin splitting against the frozen handle. Every strike felt like lifting the weight of the world. The overseer's gaze burned into him. When Malik faltered, the man snarled and raised his whip. The crack of leather split the air, slicing across Malik's shoulders. Pain flared, hot and sharp, stealing his breath. He clenched his teeth, refusing to cry out. The overseer smirked, satisfied with his silence, and moved on. Malik forced himself to swing again. Beside him, another prisoner whispered through chattering teeth, "Keep moving, brother. Stop, and they'll kill you." The man's voice was accented but warm. Malik turned his head just enough to glimpse him, tall, lean, his skin the same deep shade as Malik's. A shock ran through him. Another black man, here in this frozen hell. The man gave a grim smile. "Name's Darius. Been here to winters." "You're not alone, even if they want you to believe it." Those words struck Malik harder than the whip. For the first time since capture, he felt a flicker of connection. But before he could answer, the overseer barked again, and Darius bent his head back to work. Hours blurred into agony. Frost crept into Malik's fingers, numbing them until he could barely grip the axe. His back burned with each swing, his shoulders quaked, and his breath came in ragged gasps. Around him, men collapsed, only to be dragged up by the guards' boots by midday. Malik's hands were raw meat, blood seeping from the blisters. He looked at them and thought, "They are taking me piece by piece." When rations were handed out, he sat on a log, spooning thin cabbage soup into his mouth. It tasted of salt and rot, but it staved off the hunger clawing his belly. Across the camp, Malik saw Darius laughing faintly with another prisoner, a gray-haired Russian who muttered prayers between bites of bread. Later, Malik learned his name was Ivan, a farmer once. His family had been swallowed by Stalin's purges. His eyes carried grief, but when he spoke, there was a softness to his words. "God has not abandoned us," Ivan whispered in broken English when Malik drew near. "Even here, there is." Soul Malik wanted to believe him. He wanted to believe there was more than pain and chains. That night, back in the barracks, a young nurse named Katya slipped in. She moved quickly, quietly, her hands carrying rags and a small bottle of spirits. She crouched beside Malik without a word, dabbing his hands with stinging liquid. Malik hissed, but did not pull away. Their eyes met briefly, and though she said nothing, he saw pity there, the rarest thing in this place. "Why help me?" he whispered. Her answer was a whisper barely audible, "Because no one else will." Then she slipped away into the shadows before the guards could see. Lying back on the plank, Malik cradled his throbbing hands and closed his eyes. He thought of his mother's calloused fingers sewing cloth, his father's strong grip lifting him as a boy. Those memories steadied him, as though they stitched him together where the Gulag tried to tear him apart. The cold pressed in, merciless, but Malik clung to one truth. He was still breathing, and as long as he breathed, they had not yet won. The morning horn wailed like a funeral cry. Malik rose from his bunk slowly, every muscle stiff, every joint aching from yesterday's labor. His hands wrapped in rags Katya had pressed into his palm, burned with each movement. Around him, prisoners shuffled in silence, their eyes hollow, their steps heavy. The guards barked orders, shoving men into line. Malik moved with them, the frozen air stinging his lungs. Snowflakes drifted from the gray sky. It's quiet and deceptively gentle, a cruel contrast to the violence waiting ahead. Today's work was hauling logs from the forest to the campyard. Each log was as heavy as stone, slick with ice, and required the strength of 3 men to lift. Malik bent his shoulders under the weight, the frozen bark cutting into his neck. His breath came in short, ragged bursts, as he stumbled forward with the others. But exhaustion was quick to betray him. His knees buckled, and the log slipped from his grasp, crashing into the snow. The impact drew the overseer's attention instantly. A whistle blew. The camp froze. The overseer, a broad man with a whip coiled at his hip, strode toward Malik. His boots crunched against the snow. He didn't speak at first, only uncoiled the whip with deliberate slowness. The sound of leather sliding free filled Malik's ears like the hiss of a snake. "Podnam," the overseer ordered coldly. "Pick it up." Malik forced his trembling arms to reach for the log. His body screamed in protest, his wounds tearing open, blood seeping through the rags on his palms. The log shifted but didn't rise. His strength had abandoned him. The overseer sneered. "Choyorny." "Lazy beast," the slur, thick with contempt. Slice sharper than the cold. Then came the first strike. The whip cracked against Malik's back, fire exploding across his flesh. His body jolted, but he did not cry out. The second lash followed, then a third, each one louder, sharper, burning into him. Snow around him speckled red as his skin split beneath the leather. Prisoners watched in silence. They had seen this spectacle before, pain as punishment, humiliation as instruction. Their faces were masks of fear, each one knowing that tomorrow it could be them. The overseer paused, breathing heavily, waiting for Malik's scream. But Malik clenched his jaw, tasting blood where he bit his tongue. He would not give them that victory. His silence was all he had left to defy them. The whip cracked again, harder until Malik collapsed face first into the snow. The overseer stood over him, eyes burning with anger. "Still no scream? Up." The man roared, spittle flying into the frozen air. He lashed again, the leather curling around Malik's ribs. Malik forced himself onto his knees, vision blurred, the world spinning. The overseer growled and struck once more before tossing the whip aside. "Crawl, then," he spat. "Show them all what you are." Malik's limbs shook violently, but he obeyed, dragging himself through the snow. The log still lying abandoned behind him. Each movement tore open wounds across his back. Each breath filled his lungs with knives of frost. From the corner of his eye, Malik saw Darius watching. His friend's fists were clenched, his lips trembling with fury. Ivan, standing nearby, bowed his head, muttering prayers as though begging God to shield Malik's soul if not his body. The humiliation cut deeper than the whip. Crawling in the snow before the others, Malik felt the overseer's laughter echo in his skull. They wanted to make him less than a man, to erase even the memory of his dignity. But inside, beneath the agony, a defiant ember glowed. His silence was not weakness. It was strength. Every lash had been meant to shatter him, yet he had not given them his scream. He had not surrendered the last thing they could not chain. At dusk, when the day's work ended, Malik stumbled back to the barracks, his wounds raw, his body barely holding together. Darius slipped beside him, whispering fiercely, "You are stronger than they know. Stronger than they can ever understand." Malik didn't answer. His throat was thick with blood and frost, but his eyes spoke, and Darius understood that night. As Malik lay on the hard plank, every breath a reminder of the lashes. He remembered being a boy again, running barefoot through the sunlit fields of his homeland. He remembered freedom, and as the snow howled outside, he vowed silently, "They can break my body, but they will never own my soul." The lash wounds had barely scabbed when Malik was sent back into labor. Each movement tore them open again, streaks of blood staining the back of his rough shirt. The pain was constant. But worse was the humiliation, the memory of being forced to crawl through the snow while the guards laughed still haunted him, and yet something unexpected began to stir in that frozen hell. Bonds, fragile, desperate, but bonds nonetheless. It started with Darius. During the meager meal breaks, he sat beside Malik, offering half of his blackened bread ration. Malik protested at first, but Darius shoved it into his hands with a smirk. "Eat. If one of us starves, what good is the other?" His voice was rough but steady, a fire burning behind his eyes. He had survived 2 winters here, and every scar on his body told the story of it. Then there was Ivan, the old farmer with a weathered face carved by grief. He told stories in hushed tones of fields that once bloomed with wheat, of his wife's laughter, of children who vanished into the purges. His Russian words spilled out like prayers. And though Malik didn't understand every one, the meaning was clear. Suffering was not new, but neither was endurance. Ivan looked at Malik and often whispered a single word in broken English: "Hope," and Katya the nurse. She moved like a shadow, slipping rags or scraps of herbs into Malik's hands when guards weren't looking. Once, when no one was near, she dared to whisper, "You remind me of my brother. He died here. Don't let them kill you too." Her voice cracked at the edges, but her eyes were sharp, carrying a dangerous kindness. For a few nights, Malik felt almost human again. The barracks were still cold, the chains still heavy, but when Darius muttered jokes under his breath, when Ivan prayed, when Katya risked a glance of compassion, Malik remembered he was not entirely alone. But in the Gulag, even whispers of brotherhood were dangerous. One evening, a prisoner, desperate, starving, half-mad, tried to escape. He slipped through a gap near the barracks, running toward the forest. For a heartbeat, Malik almost believed he would make it. Then a rifle cracked. The man fell into the snow, unmoving. The guards dragged his body back into the yard and lined the prisoners up. The commandant strode forward, his fur hat bristling with frost. His face was flushed with rage. "You think you can run?" he thundered. His Russian words were sharp, but Malik caught the tone. "You think you can disobey?" The punishment was collective. That night, they dragged Malik into the yard, choosing him not for what he had done, but for what he was: different, visible, easy to humiliate. The whip returned. Blow after blow, tearing at wounds not yet healed. The prisoners were forced to watch. Guards shouted that his black skin was tougher, made for the lash. They laughed as Malik's blood mixed with the snow, staining it crimson. Darius trembled with fury. His fists clenched so tightly his knuckles bled. "Stop it," he hissed, his voice breaking, but when he stepped forward, a rifle butt smashed into his ribs. He fell, coughing blood, and was dragged away into the dark. When they returned him hours later, he was broken, eyes hollow, lips swollen, breath shallow. He said nothing. Malik reached for him, but Darius only shook his head faintly, the silence screaming louder than words. The campyard was quiet that night. Even the guards' laughter seemed thinner, less certain. The prisoners looked at Malik differently, not with pity, but with something heavier. They had seen his endurance, his refusal to scream, but they also saw the cost of kindness. Solidarity itself was punished here. Lying on his bunk, Malik stared at the rafters above him. Every breath a knife. He thought of Ivan's whispered hope, of Katya's warnings, of Darius's silence. Brotherhood in this place was fragile, always on the edge of being crushed. Yet even shattered, it was real. He closed his eyes, tasting blood in his mouth, and swore to himself, "They can punish us for caring, but they will never erase it. Not from me. Not from any of us." The snow howled outside, rattling against the barracks, as if the world itself mourned. Silence became Malik's refuge, after the lashings. After watching Darius's return, broken and Ivan's eyes fill with sorrow, Malik learned that words were dangerous. Words could be overheard, twisted, punished. So he spoke less and less, until whole days passed with nothing from his lips but ragged breaths. The overseers welcomed this silence, but twisted it into another weapon. They sneered at his silence, calling him animal, mute, beast. They ordered him to dig trenches in frozen ground, the kind of work designed to break a man's body. For hours, Malik's shovel scraped against ice-crusted soil, his fingers numb, his back screaming. He worked without sound, the rhythm of steel against earth echoing like a heartbeat. One day, Commandant ordered Malik to dig a hole large enough for a grave. "Dig your place," he jeered in broken English, smirking as the prisoners watched. Malik's shovel cut through the frozen ground, his breath a steady fog. His wounds tore open again, blood staining the snow. When the hole was deep enough, the guards laughed and ordered him to climb in. Malik obeyed, standing waist-deep in the pit, looking up at the gray sky. They filled the hole with soil until the weight pressed against his chest. Malik kept his face calm, even as the dirt reached his shoulders. Fear clawed inside him, but he did not show it. Only at the last moment did the guards order the others to dig him out. They laughed as he gasped for air, his silence intact. To them, it was humiliation. To Malik, it was proof that they could bury his body, but not his will. In the barracks, silence became his shield. He listened to Ivan's whispered prayers, to Katya's hurried warnings, to Darius's shallow, rattling breaths. Darius spoke little now, his spirit crushed by the interrogations. Sometimes in the night, he clutched Malik's arm like a drowning man clinging to driftwood. Malik never spoke, only held him until the trembling eased. The other prisoners began to notice. Malik's silence was not emptiness, but strength. He endured without complaint, bore the lashings without screams, dug graves without begging. To some, he became a symbol, proof that the overseers could not take everything. But silence was also heavy. Alone in his bunk, Malik felt the weight pressing down. His memories became louder than any whip. He saw his mother's hands weaving cloth, his father's voice calling him strong. He remembered the smell of roasted maize, the warmth of the African sun on his skin. The Gulag's silence made these memories roar, reminders of everything he had lost. At times, Malik wondered if silence itself might consume him. Some nights he thought of speaking, shouting, crying, even praying, but the words stuck in his throat. To speak was to admit weakness, to give them sound they could use against him. He would not. One bitter morning, the overseer struck him across the face for not moving quickly enough. Malik's head snapped back, blood filling his mouth. He wiped it with the back of his hand and stared coldly at the man. No scream, no protest. The overseer spat and turned away. In that silence, Malik felt something shift. They wanted noise, cries, pleas, broken voices. His silence denied them satisfaction. It was rebellion in its purest form. Yet rebellion carried a cost. Malik knew silence could not save his body. His back was a map of scars, his hands raw, his ribs aching from cold and hunger. But his silence saved something deeper, the last ember of dignity, that night. Ivan leaned closer, his voice thin with exhaustion. "They cannot break you," he whispered. "But be careful, Malik. Silence can also kill." Malik turned his head, his lips parting, but no words came. Only a faint nod outside. The Siberian wind howled, carrying the cries of wolves across the snow. Inside, Malik lay on the plank, his body broken, his spirit whispering only to itself. "I will not give them my voice. Not now, not ever." The weight of silence pressed on him like the frozen air, crushing yet sustaining. It was both his burden and his weapon, the only chain he chose to hold. The winter deepened. Frost coated the barracks each morning, turning the wooden walls into icy tombs. Men woke with frozen beards, their breaths hanging heavy in the air. Many did not wake at all. Every dawn brought the rattle of boots and the shuffle of bodies, dragged lifeless from the bunks. Malik endured, though every bone ached. His silence had become legend among the prisoners. They whispered of his strength, how he bore the lash without sound, how he dug his own grave and climbed out unbroken. They called him the man who would not break. This whispered strength spread like fire through the camp's frostbitten despair. Men who once stumbled now pushed through their labor a little longer. Ivan, coughing blood, clasped Malek's shoulder after work and muttered, "You keep us alive." Even Katya, slipping scraps of bread under his blanket at night, whispered, "They cannot crush you." It frightens them, but strength was dangerous. The overseers noticed the way prisoners looked at Malek, not with pity, but with respect. They noticed how Darius, frail as he had become, leaned on Malek's presence to keep moving. They noticed how even silence could lead to rebellion, and so set out to destroy it. One night, after the day's labor, guards stormed into the barracks. Their boots thundered against the floorboards as they dragged Malek out by his arms. He did not resist. The cold bit into his face as they pulled him into the yard. The other prisoners pressed against the windows, watching in silence. They tied Malek to a post, stripping away his coat so the Siberian wind could gnaw at his skin. The cold cut deeper than any whip, each gust stealing the warmth from his veins. His breath came in clouds, growing fainter by the hour. The commandant stepped forward, his voice dripping with mockery. "Let them see your silence now." The prisoners were forced to watch from the barracks as Malek stood bound, his dark skin turning ashen with frostbite, his body shivering violently. Hours passed. The guards took turns jeering, shoving snow into his wounds, daring him to scream. Malek clenched his jaw, eyes fixed on the black sky above. He refused. The night dragged on. Malek's body began to fail, his vision blurring, his heartbeat slowing. Memories surged, his mother's singing, his father's hand on his shoulder, the fields of his homeland bathed in sunlight. He gripped them as though they were fire inside his chest. "Endure," he told himself. "Endure, even if it kills you." When dawn came, Malek was still alive. His lips were blue, his body weak, but he had not screamed. He had not broken. The guards untied him, shoving him face first into the snow. "Animal," one spat. "Too stubborn to die." Two prisoners rushed forward under Katya's watchful eye to drag Malek back to the barracks. She knelt beside him, wrapping his frozen hands in rags, tears bright in her eyes. "Why do you endure?" she whispered fiercely. "They will kill you for it." Malek's cracked lips parted. For the first time in days, he spoke a single word, because no explanation followed. He didn't need one. That morning, whispers rippled through the camp. Malek had survived the frost. He had endured what should have killed him. To the prisoners, it was more than survival, it was defiance. His silence had become a beacon. The overseers sensed it too. Their jeers were louder, their whips harsher, their punishments crueler. But no matter what they did, Malek's silence spread like fire in the frost. Even Darius, weak and coughing, managed to smile as he whispered, "They can't kill what you've already beaten, brother." Malek lay awake that night, every bone aching, every breath a struggle. Yet, despite the torment, he felt something flicker inside. The overseers could destroy his body, but they could not erase the fire they had ignited. And though the frost pressed in on all sides, Malek knew now he was not enduring for himself alone. He was enduring for them all. The Gulag was a graveyard of men who breathed every week. More bodies were dragged out into the snow, dumped into shallow pits without name or prayer. Prisoners no longer cried when someone died. They only tightened their coats and looked away, knowing tomorrow could be theirs. The chains on their ankles were nothing compared to the chains on their spirit. But Malek carried different chains, chains of memory. When his body trembled from hunger, when his frostbitten fingers cracked open like bark, it was not the overseer's shouts he heard, but his mother's lullabies. The melody returned to him in the rhythm of the shovel striking earth. In the bitter silence of the barracks, he heard his father's voice telling him he was strong, born of soil and sun. The memories cut as sharply as the whip. They reminded him of everything stolen, of fields glowing with maize, of his sister's laughter, of a life that might have been. Yet they also kept him breathing. The overseers could scourge his flesh, but they could not erase the world within him. One evening, Ivan slumped beside him, coughing blood into a rag. His eyes were hollow, skin stretched tight over bone. "I think my time is near," he whispered. Malik looked at him, silent. "I envy you," Ivan rasped. You still have fire?" "Me. I only have cold." His thin hand trembled as he touched Malik's shoulder. "If I go, promise me you'll remember me. That's all I ask." Malik pressed his palm to Ivan's chest, where a failing heart still beat. "I will," he murmured. His voice was hoarse, cracked, but real. For Ivan, he broke his silence. The next morning, Ivan did not rise. His body was dragged out like refuse, left beneath a mound of snow. Malik watched, jaw tight, breath heavy, and whispered under his breath. "I remember." The days blurred, each one harsher than the last. Darius grew weaker, his eyes sunken, his breath shallow. Once, he had been Malik's anchor, a reminder of shared chains, shared pain. Now Malik became the anchor, carrying him through the fields, propping him against walls. Sharing scraps of bread, Katya risked her life to smuggle. One night, Darius stirred from restless sleep and tugged Malik's arm. "Brother," he croaked, I don't think I'll last much longer." "You will," Malik said firmly. But Darius shook his head. His lips curled into the faintest of smiles. "If I go, remember me as I was. Not this broken shell." His voice cracked, but his eyes held steady. "Remember our laughter, our stories, the fire in us before they chained it." Malik gripped his hand tightly. He did not speak. Words were too fragile to hold the weight of what he felt. He only nodded, pressing their foreheads together in silent vow. That winter, Darius's body finally gave out. Malik sat with him until the last breath rattled free, then closed his eyes with trembling fingers. When the guards came to drag the body away, Malik did not resist. He only whispered one word as they carried his brother into the snow. "Remember?" The barracks felt emptier, the camp colder. Malik was alone now, his companions slipping into the endless graveyard the Gulag carved each day. But their voices lived inside him. Every step he took was filled with memory, Ivan's whisper, Darius's laughter, his mother's song, his father's promise. At times, the weight of it threatened to crush him. He would lie awake, staring at the rafters above, feeling as though the chains of memory were pulling him down as surely as iron shackles. But then he reminded himself, chains could bind, but they could also connect. The past tethered him not to despair but to purpose. The overseers thought they had stripped Malik of everything. But in truth, they had given him something unbreakable, the duty to remember. Every scar on his back carried a name. Every lash, a story. Every shiver, a life lost. He bore them all within him, silent but burning. And so, when the commandant barked orders, when the guards jeered, when the frost cut to the bone, Malik endured. His body weakened, but his spirit bore an army of memories. The Gulag wanted silence, emptiness, surrender. Instead, Malik's silence roared with voices they could never kill. Asterisk spring never came to the Gulag. The snow thinned. Yes, but the ground was still frozen, the air still bitter. Prisoners whispered of warmth as if it were a fairy tale. Malik no longer expected it. His body was failing, each movement weighted with exhaustion, his lungs rasping with every breath. Yet inside, something still burned, faint but unyielding. The overseers saw his decline and rejoiced. The man who would not break was breaking. They pushed him harder, making him carry heavier loads, forcing him into the cold longer, taunting him with promises of relief if he begged. But Malik gave them nothing. His silence was no longer a choice. It was the last piece of himself left intact. One morning the commandant ordered a public punishment. The prisoners were herded into the yard, shivering in rows. Malik was dragged before them, his wrists bound, his feet bare on the icy ground. "This one thinks himself stronger than the motherland," the commandant barked. His words, heavy with venom, echoed through the camp. Today, we show what happens to defiance. The guards beat Malik with rifle butts, blows crashing into his ribs, his legs, his back. Each strike was meant to shatter him, to wring out a scream. Malik staggered, blood dripping from his mouth, but no sound left him. The prisoners watched with hollow eyes, but within them flickered something else, a quiet awe, a shared fire. Finally, the commandant grew furious. "You are nothing," he spat. "Admit it, and I will let you live." Malik lifted his head, bloodied and swaying. His lips parted, cracked and trembling. For a moment, the yard fell silent, all waiting for the sound that would mean his defeat. Instead, Malik whispered one word, "No." It was barely audible, but it carried like thunder through the prisoners' hearts. The commandant's face twisted in rage. He ordered Malik taken beyond the fence, to the frozen river where failed workers were buried in shallow graves. They threw him down in the snow, cold biting instantly into his flesh. A guard raised his rifle, ready to end him. Malik closed his eyes. He thought of his mother's hands, his father's voice, the laughter of his sister, the brotherhood of Ivan, the strength of Darius. They were all there, burning within him. "I am not nothing," he thought. "I am memory. I am fire." The shot rang out. The world went still. The guards buried him quickly, without prayer, without marker. To them, he was another nameless body swallowed by the Gulag. But inside the camp, Malik's silence thundered louder than ever. That night, the prisoners whispered his name in the barracks. Ivan, Darius, all those gone before, and now Malik. They remembered him not as broken, but as unbroken. His refusal, his silence, his last word, "No," spread from mouth to mouth, heart to heart, and in that frozen place where hope had long been strangled, Malik became more than a slave, more than a prisoner. He became a spark. The overseers had killed a man, but they had lit a fire they could not smother. Malik's body lay beneath the snow, but his ember lived in every prisoner who endured another day, who dug another trench, who refused to surrender the last fragments of themselves. The Gulag wanted silence. Malik gave them silence, but a silence that roared with memory, dignity, and defiance. The last ember did not fade. It spread.